All right, I'll be getting set up this morning to install MetalCloak Undercarriage protection on Sparky, our Wrangler 4xe. So lots to do. I'll carry out the boxes here in a moment and create a little room here in the garage around Sparky. I don't know if I need to lift it up. I notice other guys with the Rubicon, it's got probably adequate ground clearance. I probably don't need to jack it up. Probably just take the creeper and roll right under there. All right, so I'll be staging all this. This is the engine skid plate. If you're wondering if undercarriage protection adds a lot of weight to the vehicle with steel like MetalCloak, yes it does. This stuff is heavy. And that is the battery skid plate, since this is a 4xe. Not as heavy as the engine skid plate. Alright, now I'm going to set this one to the side. It's my recollection, the transfer case skid plate, which is what's in that box. Memory serves, it goes first and everything else kind of connects to it. And that is the fuel tank skid plate. Okay, so 4 large components. Transfer case skid plate, engine skid plate, battery skid plate, fuel tank skid plate. I'll be unboxing them in a second. I've got the instructions on the printer. I've gone through them once already. Seems pretty straightforward. Got the tools laid out and we'll get started. But that is the setup. There's one more small box that has the hardware.
Here's a top tip. Before you go too far, double check that you have the correct instructions. So I'll just show a few little accelerated clips of me under the Jeep, out from under the Jeep, under the Jeep, out from under the Jeep. Nothing made sense. I could not make heads or tails of these instructions. Fortunately, just when I was ready just to dive under the Jeep and start taking off stuff, because, I mean, how hard is it to figure out how to install undercarriage protection? I went one last time, went back in the house, pulled it up in the computer, and found out that MetalCloak doesn't have all the instructions in one place. The 4xe instructions are in a different location. I have no idea why I printed out and started with the wrong instructions, but thank goodness I didn't do any real damage or stuff I had to undo. So once I had the correct instructions, well, of course, at that point, everything made total sense.
little babe. Go to sleep, you little babe. Go to sleep, you little babe. Go to sleep, you little babe. Mom's gone away and your dad's gonna stay. Didn't leave nobody but the baby. Go to sleep, you little babe. 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 Everybody's gone in the cot and the car. Didn't leave nobody but the baby. You're a sweet little babe. You're a sweet little babe. You're a sweet little babe. You're a sweet little honey in the rock and the sugar don't stop. Don't bring her bottle to the baby. Don't you weep, pretty babe. 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 She's all gone with the red shoes on. Gonna need another loving baby. Go to sleep, you little babe. 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 You and me and the devil makes three. Don't need no other loving baby. Go to sleep, you little babe. 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 Come and lay your bones on the alabaster stones and be my ever-loving baby.
All right, I'm going to give myself a little bit of credit. I didn't dive in. I kept looking and looking and looking, and nothing matched up. And then I realized UnderCloak has the installation instructions for the 4xe system in a completely different place. And when I was looking at this not match, I'm not looking at this like, then those plates don't even look like the plates in the instructions. They got the battery on the wrong side of the, yeah. It's all good. Take a little break here. It's really starting to question reality there for a minute. And I'm going to go make a proper printout of the instructions that are for this vehicle. And that should make things go a little smoother. All right, well, I'm going to have some fun editing this and deciding what to include and what not, because wow, was I down a rabbit hole. So I'm going to start over because I don't even have the right tools laid out. Thank goodness I stopped before I completely lost me. Significantly different. 13, 18, 16, 3/4 9. Sorry, it's only one. You need a drill. You need 11/16 drill bit. You need a 3/4 inch wrench. And a different Allen key. Nothing matched. I'm like, this does not make any sense. Yeah, well, if you look at the wrong instructions, nothing will make sense. So I'm going to get everything set up for the correct instructions. I've got them printed in color this time because they were so hard to read in black and white. And everything should go a lot smoother the second time around. And like I'm sitting there, I'm like, the only way to attack this is to take the transfer case off. So I read the correct instructions, and what does it say? So transfer case skid, And of course the instructions first thing out of the gate say take the transfer skid off. So yeah, the world makes sense again. Okay, so like I said, I'm getting queued up correctly with the correct instructions. There's one tool missing from here. Let's just go through them. So there's my ratchet. I do an extension there, a 3/4 inch wrench, a 13, 16, and 18 sockets, 3/4 and 9/16, 8mm Allen wrench. That is a different Allen key from the wrong instructions, 5/16, and a drill. Oh, and an 11/16 drill bit. I didn't even think about it. I started going through. I'm like, man, that's an enormous drill bit. I mean, I hope that little drill can spin that bit for the hole they need me to drill. I did read ahead. It looks more like I'm cleaning out a hole than drilling a new one. But yeah, my wife's going to pick that up. The biggest, and yeah, that's a big drill bit. I've got a 5/8 drill bit. I was proud that I had one. But I do not have an 11/16 drill bit. It's not in a standard set. That is a big drill bit. So while she's picking that up, I'm going to get started with everything else. But yeah. Very glad I found the correct instructions, and on the 4xe, from what I've been seeing, the MetalCloak UnderCloak installation on a 4xe is quite a bit more involved than the other models. There is a lot to this install, way more involved reading through the correct instructions, way more involved than the other models. You got a little bit of hole drilling, you got a bunch of little components here, like a little coolant pump, but it's all good. So, I'm going to get started on disassembling the existing skid plate. All right, get after it here. Certainly, it'll be a lot easier to do this with the correct instructions. Wood wedged all in here, another good indication that Sparky going in a forest really needs better undercarriage protection. And what the factory Rubicon package allows. Keep some sense of orientation here, so I'm getting seasick. Trying to look at this, but these are the large bolts that we're taking out as we remove the skid plate. I'll either get up and walk to the other side or time just to make sure I'm not farther back in the layout. Yep, it's all good. Actually, right here, I'm going to run to the other side and just make sure I'm not removing bolts unnecessarily to drop that off. It on this. Tore that line out. All right. Couple more 18s, 2 13s, and then this portion is done. Put the camera under there here real quick just to see what that looks like. So that's what's dropped out so far. That I believe is the plate for a little cooling pump for the batteries. I have that right. Again, there's quite a bit of transmission fluid on those from the previous incident. That's that front cross member. And now there's just a couple more 18mm bolts back here, a couple of 13mm bolts. And this will be done. Before, that's the one that comes from this side. And then it'll be the little 13mm bolts will be next. So you're underneath here, and boy, it's really hard to figure out what they're talking about. And then I'm looking around, but it's right on top of that frame member. And that is the fastener they're talking about right there. And they kind of pump, they don't tell you what size wrench that is, I'll figure it out. But I've got everything else in that set of the instructions off. That's the skid plate for that little coolant pump over there. It's actually in front of the main cross member, and that's the cross member that comes back toward the transmission. And yeah, you can certainly see the MetalCloak is going to have way better protection. All right, so I'm going to get a wrench on that jobber right there. And I'll come back. All right, so that's that little nut, and that is a 10mm wrench that I used to pop up on there. All right, so another challenging bit here. A threaded U-nut that you remove with a flat screwdriver. Also not initially on the list of stuff is the, there we go, that's what it's talking about. So I didn't take off that 18mm bolt. I was wondering about that. I think it was in the instructions. I think I just missed it. I'm glad I did it last, otherwise it would have been hanging from that one tiny little bolt. That would have been a bad idea, so I'm glad I didn't. That 18mm has to come off, then this cross member from the skid protection will come down, and then I will remove these two little U-clips with a screwdriver, one on each side. All right, now it makes sense. Okay, so I think I found what they're looking for. Now I couldn't find in the instructions where it told me to take these two guys out. But if I don't, as far as I can tell, this bar is not going to come down. If the bar doesn't come down, it doesn't make sense to take those clips out of here. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and take these two out, drop this bar. I think it just obviously has to happen. It just wasn't clear in the instructions that they anticipate that happening at this point. All right, so you go to drop this cross member. And if you take these two 13mm nuts off, right, it's really hard to see there, but right here and right here, then it will hang from these hoses, which is not good. Now, you can't even really see it, but there's a clamp up in there that holds those hoses to the cross member, which seems to be a 10mm nut. So I'm going to loosen that clamp, loosen the 13mm nut over here again. Backlighting, right? So you can kind of see where that 10mm nut comes off that stud that holds that bracket. All right. There, that guy is what's held there. So you can see there's two studs there and go to those two brackets. Part of the battery system. Well, the GoPro battery died just as I was finishing that explanation, but I hopefully got all of it. So again, two studs on that cross member, each with a 10mm nut that go to those two brackets for lines to the battery. I believe those are battery cooling lines, not really sure. And these two guys, I didn't see that in the instructions. These two guys have to be removed in order to drop that. Because if you don't, and I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't have dropped that yet, but it says to remove these clips right here, these C-clips that, you know, basically secure the bolt. I don't know if the lighting is going to work for that. But you can't very well remove those if that bar is still in place, so should be all set now. So that took some doing. I mean, you see these in a lot of places in modern cars. It's a little clamp with, you know, thread, and they call it like a C-clip. But these are big, and yeah, I had to bend it quite a bit before it popped out, and then it yelled a bit. So I don't want to scratch the paint off the chassis here fighting with them, but yeah, that did not come off without a little bit of a fight from using the screwdriver there. Other side, and then I think I'm going to take a little break. Okay, so I'm going to get a little more done here before I break. I'm going to get ready for church and do stuff. It was good to take a little break. I got so many issues that a friend of mine who works on cars said the same thing as he got older. Just sometimes you get really sick to your stomach from sitting under it, which I did. Okay, these 4 bolts have to come out. All right, so the next bit is a bit interesting. Kind of had to muddle through the box of additional rails and parts and make sure that this matches that picture, which it does. So this now goes on to the passenger side frame rail using just the one hole in front of the cross member. So we'll go do that now. All right, now the slightly tricky bit here, try and block some of the sun, is that this plate that's supporting that pump stays above this rail. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward how this fits in. So this rail is going to go right like that. Alright, so that's that. Now I have to go get the next rail that fits between it and kind of work my way down here. So it looks like the way they do this is you have a set of rails to bolt on top of the fuel skid plate. So Remember the guy via email, like Chris from their sales department, told me you do reuse the fuel tank skid plate. So it looks like the rails go over it, and then the large body armor just kind of encloses the existing skid plate. Okay, so one other minor nitpick here. It says use the middle rail. I'm pretty sure it's this one, judging by the picture. And the only reason I think it is because of the little tab visible just to the left of his gloved hand. And that was a little more exciting than it should have been, simply because the skid plates like to move. So with the creeper rolling underneath me, trying to pry the fuel tank skid plate back over toward the driver's side so that that bolt would line up through the 3 holes while also holding the middle bar up. Well, you get the picture. That was rather unpleasant. But, and you got to be careful because these are super fine threads. You don't want to strip them. But all told, all right, so those 2 bars are in. Or rails, I should say. You can see the 3 rails. There's H, G, and F in their labeling. So they're not obviously tight at this point, so I just put them there loosely. So I'll pick up from there. You can kind of see how the MetalCloak is going to clamp on and sort of encapsulate the factory fuel tank skid. Okay, just kind of horsing down my dinner here. Just got back from church. I just got over here and tightened up those rail pieces real well. So those are all tightened down now. And the next bit, according to the instructions, is to set the brackets for the engine skid plate. So it's a little different on this one. The others, you go transfer case and work your way out. And I got to correct instructions, read through them again. This one's a little different. It has you put those rails on, put a couple of brackets up toward the engine, and then the engine skid plate, and back and forth from there. So it's the sequence is a little different on the 4xe undercloak system. On the next page, these numbers on page 4 match the numbering system on page 3. So for these engine mounts, they call it out in the instructions here as, let me grab that, 6 and 9 from the bill of materials. So there's 6 called out and there's 9. And again, 6 there, gusset strap, and 9 gusset strap. So again, 6 and 9. Now let's see if I've grabbed the right ones out of the box. That looks to me like 6. So I think I've got the right one there. Yeah, that matches everything. Okay, so that is 6. Now did I get 9 correct? 9 has a little tail. And yep, this is 6 and 9. Very good. All right. Okay, now that's an example of something that would have taken about 30 seconds with a decent picture. So with my phone down there with me, zooming in on that picture on the online version, I was finally able to figure out where that is. So hopefully with this video, if you're installing this system, it'll be much easier for you. I'll show you the context of where that picture is. Otherwise, it's like these people trying to take Ukraine war videos and verify them based on terrain features. It's exactly what I had to do. I'm crawling all over the place here, hit my head, knocking things around, more and more frustrated. Let's see if I can get lighting on that. All right, so we're looking at the front axle. That's how I was able to figure that out. I was able to see the red of the shock absorber at one point. Yeah, great, I'm gonna put fresh batteries in this LED, but all right, I think that's working, that you can actually see. So there's the control arm, there's the little protector dealie, and that's what shows up in the picture. You can see in their picture a little bit of the exhaust pipe. And then if you just keep on looking, which I had to do, and then you have to realize, I'm like, there's no way, oh, we have to put that part on the other side of the drive shaft, and make sure you get the orientation of the part right. And right there in that little mold, and that little attachment fitting right there, a little, I don't even want to call that, a mount that's welded onto the side of the frame to support, I think that supports the engine mount there. Then you will see there's a little spot to put that bolt, and then with your fingers on the other side, you can do the 3/4 inch bolt with the nut on the other side. So again, you're trying to understand the instructions, that's where that little mystery bit is the front engine driver's side bracket is up over the drive shaft, up into that area right there. That's how to interpret that. That's another good lesson in life. Fortunately, it's nothing bad, but so I didn't wear my safety glasses under the Jeep right there because I can't see anything. And a little bit that the safety glasses interfere made it worse. And obviously rubbing your eyes not the thing to do. And I have no idea how. It was just an eyelash probably, but something got in my eye. But again, that's why whenever possible, wear the safety glasses under there. Okay, now, unfortunately, it'll be a similar bit of frustration here on the passenger side. You can kind of see that little cup. I think I know where that is from having groped around here on the driver's side. So I'll get the creeper over there, the light. I had to replace the batteries in the light. And that's a 9/16, not a 3/4 head bolt. So I grabbed the hardware, fiddle around with that, recognize the orientation, and hopefully that will go less aggravatingly. Again, you can kind of tell from that photo. I have to look at the other drawing because that doesn't show the bottom of the bar to make it clear what the orientation is. But I think there's only one way to match that photo. But again, it's a real nightmare to go under there and figure out what that's a picture of. Okay, so again, I'm glad I'm taking my time. I still don't know where the heck that is. I was down there for a while. I got a rough idea. And I reread it says flag nut. Now, flag nut can mean a lot of different things. But then if I look closely, oh, there's some shiny gold there. Yes, so there's something that only has a hole. This is the nut that goes on the other end. And the 9/16 bolt goes in there. All right, I'm going to take the camera with me, take one more crack at finding that location. All right, that was super impressive. I got to say, that was one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do on a bolt-on accessory. Now, this drawing is very hard to follow. This is actually on the driver's side. This is on the passenger side. And that's what I just put in, and that's the flag nut. I'm glad I looked closely at that. And listen, yeah, flag nut, not hex nut. I almost used just a standard hex nut until I reread it. I'm like, wait a minute. And with the flag nut, at least it sort of made sense. Man, that was brutal. Absolutely brutal. So I'll show here in a second what I had to do. First, let me just show where this is. All right. Now, use my little drop light. And that is what you have to do. You have to get the flag nut up and over, hold this fairly heavy bracket while you get that bolt to thread into the flag nut. Yeah, that's not easy. It took me about 30 tries. Lactic acid built up on my arm, set it down. Now, if you got a lift, it's not, even then it's hard, but at least you're standing upright. I'm lying on a creeper trying to get this stupid thing in there. But, oh my gosh, was that really ever something else? So that's in now, and it's just, you know, cinched tight because everything has to be able to move around. Now, to show you how I finally did it, you could try it just with your fingers, and maybe you're more nimble than I am, but I could not get the flag nut at the right angle. So I used my little magnet you use to pick up parts that fall, and I used that to hold the flag nut at approximately the right angle. Then with my left hand, I held the bracket, and with my right hand got my fingers just in there enough, and it's really hard to fit in there because your arm, you know, everything's in the way of your arms. And then I could get it just started. I was afraid it was cross-threaded, so I had to be careful. Then I had to use a long extension, a knuckle, and a 9/16 socket to get on the bolt and actually be able to swing the ratchet with all the obstructions. See, that was not fun, and this is not the correct nut to use, so I'm glad I caught on pretty quickly before I went too far that, yeah, not a hex nut, but the flag nut. Okay, so that's on there now. Wow. That's probably going to end up being the single longest step in the entire project. I can't believe how hard that was. And if you look under the Jeep, you kind of see now where those brackets for the engine skid plate go. Right, you got one on the far side, one on the near side. Alrighty then. All right, now I had thought that it was the transverse case skid that would go on first. I think I saw that from instructions to other models. So there's a lot going on here. This is the first thing that'll get a bolt. And that's where the little pump was mounted to the old skid plate. So it's going to mount to that, and you have to put a bolt up through it. I believe it's one of the factory 18 millimeters. Here and here is where hardware supplied goes through those gussets that I just mounted and attaches to that. I'm guessing there's a mounting bolt or something here too. That'll become obvious enough here soon, but this thing weighs a flippin' ton. So it's going to be really challenging. I'm going to try and use my little floor jack to kind of support one end while I try to position it. So I won't film me getting hit on the head and cursing and all that. I'll just kind of show the setup once I've got it in place. But I'm pretty sure that's what I'm going to do. Just kind of lay this on the floor, put the small jack underneath it, kind of jack it up into position, and then see how effectively I can hold it there while I put in the hardware. All right, now I'm contemplating deviating a bit from the instructions here, and I'll show why. First, I'll kind of investigate this. All right, so there's the engine skid plate. I'll add a little light to the subject there. And I just set it up on my old small jack so I can kind of wheel it around and all. Now it seems to me I should try to put in those bolts first. But the instructions call for putting this in first and mounting it to the pump. Now the reason I'm hesitating is because, well, let's see what that mounts to. All right, that's the right thing to do. I thought that would possibly put all the stress on the pump and the plastic parts, but it's actually got a pretty decent sized steel bracket mounted to the frame. So as heavy as this doggone thing is, I'm just going to follow the instructions. All right, so I'm going to use the jack. Maybe I'll grab a jack stand to help me kind of hold this in place. And then one of the factory bolts, I'm kind of like filming the back of my light there. One of the factory bolts will come up through that hole and secure into that nut. That'll hold the back end, then I'll secure the front end. All right, I made a good faith effort here, but I'm going to have to deviate a little bit, and I'll show why. Just going to have to do the bolt slightly out of sequence. I wanted to follow their guidance and put that pump bracket on first, but you can see that the jack stand is too tall to fit underneath it, so that was fun. So I can raise it with the jack, but I mean, that was just so easy to get that bolt hole to line up. So I'm just going to pop the bolt in there, allow that to be a pivot point, and then I can swing the jack back to the end, or kind of over there, and just gently raise that bit to where those two line up, then pop the factory bolt in there. So that should work. I think that's going to work out better. Well, that didn't quite work out either, because as I'm trying to get those two close together, it just wiggles too much. So I'm going to put the other bolt in on the other gusset. And notice this gusset moved quite a bit. That's why they have to be loose. I'll check clearances when I'm all done, just to make sure that the position in which they finally tighten does not cause any kind of interference or rubbing. But I'm going to have to put the other 3/4 bolt. That's not 3/4 diameter, 3/4 head bolt over there. Then the front end will swing, and then I can lower the jack, move it back under where the jack stand does not fit, raise the back, and then I should be able to get that bolt in. All right, so I got those two bolts loosely in front, moved the jack back there, and they seem to be pretty well, the bolt holes on the other side seem to be pretty well lined up. So I'll see, and I look at it, actually, yeah, you can see it right there. So I think I can wiggle that around a bit and get that bolt in there. If I can get that bolt in there, then I can just kind of move the jack around to get everything squared away. Should work out. Regardless, can't even make words. And now 3 bolts are in, and we'll take it from here in the instructions. There's still a couple of kind of weird big steps, like that 11/16 drill bit. It's a little scary to be drilling holes or cleaning out holes in the frame, but regardless, yeah, it's mostly downhill from here. Not easy, but mostly downhill. And I was looking at the other side. It's like, hey, did the lines that got hit by that stick, which are basically those lines on the other side, would this prevent it? And like, Chris, their marketing guy, had sent me a picture, and he said, yeah, it would. And sure enough, yeah, you can see the engine skid on both sides. Does a pretty good job of protecting those two lines. Now, that line is pretty close to that gusset, so I'll be curious to see as I get everything mounted, am I going to have any clearance issues there? Looks like it's going to be okay. There's a bit of a gap there, and those aren't exactly the kind of things that are going to move a lot. All right, so as it turns out, that's the next step. So there on the driver's side frame, that hex hole, 11/16 drill bit. Now, pretty, yeah, you can see right in front of the muffler. It'll be pretty easy to figure out. Make sure I drill in the right spot. I'll get the drill set up. Again, pop on the safety glasses, and we'll get that bad boy in there. And put a little, like it says, put a little paint inside the hole to make sure that's not a source of rust in the future. There's that body mount, there's the muffler, and there's 1 and 2 hex, and it clearly shows that it's the front one. So at least that wasn't ambiguous. And then that's the hole you drill, and yeah, an 11/16 hole through chassis steel is not fun. But a battery operated drill with a brand new drill bit did get through it. And then I just kind of touched it up with some black spray paint. A few other scrapes and scuffs along the rail I touched up at the same time. All right, so we got our 11/16 hole. I believe like a big riv nut goes in there, and then we'll get going again. All right, so it's feeling a little crabby when it says install the rivet nut using a supplied tool. I'm like, what? So I'm digging around in the hardware because that definitely does not match that. But it's all good. It was in the other bag of parts, so they do supply you with a 3/4 inch bolt and nut to be used to compress the rivet nut into the hole you just drilled. Okay, so a bit annoying, but not the end of the world. That's what was provided as the riv nut hardware. That nut doesn't thread on that bolt, and that bolt didn't thread on the riv nut. I didn't bother to check to see what it is, whether it's metric or just the wrong thread or whether it's damaged. But I did confirm the bolt they gave me to use to mount the final hardware does thread in the riv nut. And it was a standard 1/2 inch bolt thread. So 3/4 head, 1/2 inch bolt, standard thread. And this is how you do a riv nut when you don't have a riv nut tool. You basically hold the head of the bolt steady and you tighten down by basically turning this counterclockwise. You push this nut down the bolt and smash this, or basically what you end up doing is pulling it in and it flattens this top part and anchors the riv nut in the sheet metal. So that's what I'm going to do with the hole I just drilled. And yeah, that was quite an undertaking to find all this hardware in my scrap parts bin. It was unpleasant in more ways than I can count. If you ever fought with riv nuts, and this is a huge riv nut, so you have to get it in the hole, but it has to bite enough that when you try to compress it, it doesn't just spin. And of course this one spun, so with all my strengths, with a 3/4 inch wrench and a 1/2 inch drive 3/4 socket, I didn't end up bringing out a big breaker or cheater. I was able to wedge it in there so it wouldn't spin and compress it enough. So actually now I better just do the proper test. Grab the bolt that goes with it that I believe was set aside. I don't think the others have the same thread. They might, but I'm gonna keep this one here just in case I'm right, that it has a different thread. And it's like, well, I guess there's 2 ultimate tests. One, can this thread, or, you know, is it going to be damaged or something? And it's going to take a little bit of a fight to get it in there. And is the hole sufficiently well centered to align? Because there's not a ton of slop in these. All right, let's get this bad boy. Let's just see. I would have sworn that would be the 8mm one. Well, in any event, I can see that it's going to. Not sure that's the right size Allen key, but it just took no oomph at all. So, okay, that wasn't a waste of time. The riv nut works. And if you ever had riv nuts in your vehicle, I had dealer installed options on my 2008 Hummer that had riv nuts, and yeah, it's not my favorite bit of hardware because over time they can start to spin, and the things I had to remove were obviously going to be a challenge given that the That's the right, yeah, no, that's not the right key either. I didn't have to like get a cutting wheel or anything, but you know, it's very difficult to get the hardware removed once the riv nut spun, and then had them all spot welded so that it wouldn't happen again. But again, I'm not a big fan of riv nuts. So I think I'm just going to use the jack to push that back up against flush, just so it's like ready to go. And then I'll mess around with seeing what hardware makes sense. Then the transfer case skid plate will just slide right up on it. It was quite the voyage of discovery. I found another Allen key that works. And I realized all of these bolts come in two different styles. You can see one's SAE, one's metric. So you go to the welded bolts that UnderCloak, MetalCloak provides. Those presumably are the coarser threaded SAE bolts like this. Here, let's just test that theory. That one's clearly one of the coarser ones. And that's also why I couldn't figure out where the Allen key seemed to fit and then not. Yep. So there you go. So some of these bolts, I'm just going to be very careful. Fortunately, I've learned over the years not to force it. Okay, so later in the instructions it does explain when you're putting a transfer case in that there are two different types of bolts with two different thread patterns. It says you're going into the cross member, so maybe they didn't want me to put those in until now anyway. So it's all good, but yeah, you got to be careful with that bit. All right, so it does make sense, and they do spell out here, hey, be careful. There's two different types of bolts that look almost exactly the same here. Okay, so again, it's quite a bit really in the details here. So I just used the creeper to help me get under there, and then the jack, and just kind of use the one bolt in the riv nut so I could look at it. Now what you have to do here is kind of roll that one back, and it's got to be fairly square, and then roll it forward with this metal, well, that metal actually, straddling this bolt up in that tab. So this goes above that, and you can't just like muscle it in place very easily because that end is a fairly snug fit, which of course it has to be. So I'll have to take this bolt back out and just kind of gently, with the jack's help, roll it backwards, lift this end up, roll it forwards. Hopefully there's enough slop for it to fit. That what I tried worked, so that worked out just fine. Use the jack, slid it up over, tighten these up a bit, and I think that's all the ones I was supposed to put in. I'll double check and we'll move on to the next step. So to be careful which one are SAE, which ones are not. Put those in that plate, make sure it's the right plate. Hardware directed toward the rear, and it goes right on there, which would strongly suggest that these little jobbers don't need to be there anymore. That's very likely to get in the way later. All right. I'm guessing, I don't guess, I'll just go read. I'm guessing the gas tank skid plate is soon to come back here. All right, so now it's time to take the gas tank skid there. And I'll probably use the creeper again. That worked out pretty well. I'll set it down on the creeper, the other side of the vehicle. I'll carry it back, get it on the creeper. A little plate I just put in. This is going to slide up on there, and then we'll secure that toward the back. All right, so I'll let the GoPro kind of observe my foolishness. And that's very easy to do. Get too awkward to reach in here so that I hurt myself. Off. But as many times as that's happened, it still freaks me out. The GoPro makes so much noise when its battery dies that you swear a hidden bomb's about to go off. So by the grace of God, I did not crush my fingers there. I think 2 or 3 times. The lip of the gas tank skid plate slipped off the forward end while I was messing with the aft end, trying to get it up on the jack, which I eventually did. I did actually just after the battery died. So I dinged my hand a little bit, but not from that. It was from something else. This bolt is actually in, and that bolt is secured to the rail, which is secured to the chassis, which is not going to let it slide backwards anymore. So it's not yet time to tighten that up, but the gas skid plate is in position, and as you can see, the jack is holding the aft end up until we get the rest of that hardware figured out. And that's another minor challenge, is it sort of shows you how to hang this at the back of the skid plate. I broke out the diagram because there's two that look really similar, but if I look closely at the diagram, I'm pretty sure this is the one that goes at the back of the gas tank. And I'll know right away if I can correctly identify those features, whether it's long or short. So, but I'm pretty sure this is the right one. There is a small, basically the bolt hole I'm looking for is right inside the little suspension control arm there. I gotta find the bolt that it goes, okay, and that's the bolt that it goes up to. Now, given that that's an angle, might be the other one, but let's just see. This can handle an angle. Alright, so not super fun to get in there with a breaker bar, 1/2-inch drive ratchet, finally to get that loose and then tighten back down. Now I just gotta wiggle in there with a 9/16 wrench and ratchet, tighten down the connecting bolt, and that's one of the gussets down. Okay, I'm fairly confident that this is the middle gas tank mount. Fairly certain that is the bolt that will mate up to those holes. The only problem, one or the other. The only problem is the bracket doesn't fit. So we'll see. Okay, upon further review, I can see where this seems to match. Where it goes here up top, and then this will come over and match the side of the middle of the gas tank skid plate. All right, let's give her a go here. We're going after that bolt and these guys. Let's see if I can find a good place. All right. Gotta see everything there, including those two holes right there. Lift this up a touch. So yeah, that is the right one. It fits. I'm just gonna take out one bolt, get her in there. Do enough of these kind of projects, you know, there's a certain point at which the laws of nature can be violated. So right up in there somewhere is the nylock nut. I've got a magnetic wand there, scraped around all over there. Wherever it went, it vanished. So I can either disassemble the entire thing and find it, or I can grab another nylock nut, so you can pretty much guess what I'm going to do. But that was amazing. I probably spent 20 minutes probing around there. That was just freaking great. It was recording and I didn't know it was. Okay, joiner plate, keep the hardware toward the rear, same thing as last time, and we'll slide it up in there. You notice another fiddly bit, they're in the end of the joiner plate. I believe that's supposed to clamp those hoses into place onto the joiner plate, so I'm trying to make sure I'll just kind of randomly pop this in there. So it's right there. And the light sort of illuminating it right there, and you can see those hoses, so I'm pretty sure I have to arrange it so that they attach to each other. Alright, just gotta pop the ratchet and the 9/16 box end wrench on there, and we'll get that clamped down. All right, so now again, that's the last plate. And again, I will use the creeper. Just make sure I got the orientation right. Yeah, the part with the lip obviously has to go to the back then. And I'll set it on the creeper, roll it into position, put the jack under the back end, put the front end up into those beveled washers, and I should be able to roll it right into place. Definitely feeling my fatigue. Hours and hours have gone by. Obviously, I could have done this a bit more efficiently, but this is quite a system. With the creeper, it wants to roll backwards, or when I try and lift the back, if I let it go back just an inch, it falls out from under the washers and makes a big noise, but should work out. All right, so flange washers, everything pretty much in place. Get the supports in the back, and it's just pretty much tightening everything up. So that's kind of the overview of the bolts I have to remove in order to put the hangers in. And you can see there's not a whole lot left. GG, tighten her all up. So there are two left. There's the long straight one, and then there's this funky one. So let's see which one goes on in this particular area. My gloves a moment too early there. Yeah, it definitely looks like this one. And the way they want you to do it, it looks like, you gotta match that picture, it's more like this. I guess like this. So, underneath the exhaust hanger, this slides in, and then the bolt goes back down, and this little jobber hangs down. And before can call it a night or morning, I suppose, at this point. Then tighten it all up, and that's it. All right. All right, well, I am pretty exhausted, and looks like I'm about to lose another GoPro battery. Just run out again, having charging, swapping. There's one last little jobber there. And there's a bolt right there that it attaches to, so the hanger will, and then connect to right there. And that's it. All right, well, it's 3 in the morning. Maybe it's 3:30, I can't remember. And I got it all tightened up. Just because there's one spot that concerns me. Ironically, it's the same transmission lines that failed this on the other side of the engine. They are in direct contact with one of the supports of the engine skid plate. So either the lines aren't where MetalCloak thought they would be, or the support isn't where MetalCloak thought it should be. So obviously I went through quite a few extra tools. That's not all of them, but whether a 10mm open-end wrench was the first one. I thought, oh, I'll make a note of that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, you know, interesting knuckles. Then when you have to try and lay the riv nut, the hardware provided wasn't the right hardware. Got that in there. Actually set pretty well. But that's it. Sparky should be free to roam about the forest without a repeat. All right, there we go. Now the light's on. And there is that support. And right there you can see the support on the chassis to which it attaches. So that is the support. You can see exactly where it bolts at each end. I'm quite certain from the directions that is where I was supposed to attach it. And it's like the only place that you could attach it that it would work at both ends. And that's the problem right there, is there's just insufficient clearance there for those two transmission lines, only just slightly. So I think what I'll probably end up doing is just trying to put some kind of rubber isolation there.